So welcome back to network security. Last time we have been discussing the challenges of authentication. So to tell some further elements. So what we saw last time is that in asymmetric cryptography, when you have a private and a public key, both directions can be applied. So there's no distinguishing order in which you apply the keys. So you could first use the public key and then decrypt it. That would be regular encryption, and the recipient uses the private key on the left side to decrypt the secret message. That's one option to apply it. And the second option to apply it is to use first the private key, and then that acts as a signature, and everybody can verify with the right public key that really the person with the private key has written or somehow signed that document. So, and the main challenge, what we always had remaining in asymmetric cryptography is how to verify that the key, here the public key of B, is belonging to Bob, or to whom does it belong. Because we had the problem that if we have no way to verify it, then basically the secure communication can be established to some man in the middle, who establishes also secure connection to Bob, here claiming to be Alice, and there claiming to be Bob. And then Alice communicates with her assumed partner Bob securely, and Bob communicates with his assumed contact Alice, but in reality they are communicating with somebody else who is just pretending and faking the identity. So this man in the middle issue needs to be resolved, and the core element that we identified last time is basically assuming that we have some kind of assuming that we have some kind of strong binding between Bob and the public key, then we could have all the nice security properties that we want. So let's assume we say first we are Alice, and then Bob sends in some kind of number used once. This is then signed, and let's assume we already have that step, so we don't need to ask. Basically, let's skip this out. If we would just take this message from Alice and compare it with Alice's public key, then we can verify that really somebody, so the person that we are communicating to, has used the private key of Alice to send us the message. So this must be Alice. So somehow we need to have this binding. Who is this person that we are communicating to? Yes. So I don't like the pizza example. I mean, otherwise, if we don't have that binding, then everybody could somehow claim to be somebody else. Yes. Yeah, and one element that we also saw the last time, this digital signatures that I just started with, is because we can first encrypt with the private key, everybody can verify that's working fine. We just have the issue that the message is very large. So this M is exactly as large as the signed content if we sign the message. So what we introduced as next is this message digest, which takes a very large, potential very large input. So from our a set of symbols, in our case 0 and 1, and arbitrary number of symbols, it always maps to the same size, let's say 160 bits. And what should be easy to do is to calculate. So there should be very easy to take some kind of M and to get a hash of M. That should be easy, but it should be very hard to to retrieve from a given hash what was the input. So that should be very difficult. I also said that one common approach or one typical approach how to do this is you can think of it as applying some kind of key derived from the message on the message itself in an asymmetric approach. In a symmetric approach, and you need, if the key is somehow related to the message and you apply that key to the message itself, then obviously you can compute it in the one direction but not in the other, because you don't have the message to decrypt what the message was. So, and the benefit of this is that such mechanisms can be applied blockwise. So typically also in symmetric encryption what we have is that you have a message that's very long. So this is the message stream somehow. It has some end, so and then you split it into blocks and then you first take this block and then you apply the content of the block to the second block, and then you apply the content of the second block to the third block, so that you create some kind of chain that every bit in the message has influence on the outcome. And by this you can get a very nice fingerprint. Every bit in the message had influence on every output bit, and if you change any kind of bit in the message, the output should be very different, so tests should have some kind of drastical effect. And at the end, the size of the output message is as large as the block, as one single block, and not as the whole message, but just one single block. So 160 bits are feasible. So, and with this kind of fingerprint, it's really convenient because we have two properties. Property number one, it's small, so we can easily add a very small signed signature. Yeah, so signed signature. So the signature is very small because you just apply it on the fingerprint. And the second element is if any kind of bit changes in the original message, then it has a drastic effect on the hash of it. So it should have some kind of so-called avalanche effect, so that if one bit changes, the expectancy of how many bits in the output should change is that half of the bits should somehow change. So every bit has a chance of 50% to be changed. So there's really a big effect. It's not just a regional change in the hash, it's really a drastic change. So every bit is very significant. So, and by these two elements, first, okay, the nice thing is it's small, but the second thing is that integrity is provided, meaning that we can detect modifications in the message. So if somebody wants to change the message on its path, and it will be not able to recreate a new and basically okay, so if you send this kind of hash to compare the sent message, then the only feasible way to create a message that is not detected as modified is if you create a new message dash that results in the same hash, but that should be as infeasible as calculating basically the input for a given hash. So this is as improbable as well. So any kind of modification has a drastic effect on the hash. So it's very improbable to find a new hash, to find a message that creates the same message, the same hash as the previous one. So this should be both very difficult. It should not be able to create a new message with the same hash. So basically, for the attacker, it becomes impossible to modify any kind of bits in the message, and basically still maintain the signature of the original author. Okay, so so far to with the signatures and what we can do, and then we looked into the question, how can we guarantee that, let's say, a public key belongs to a specific person? And this was the last element that we discussed. So basically, for that we have public key infrastructures. So, and if we talk about public key infrastructures, they are built the following way. So basically, we want to combine an entity, a person, website, router, and its public key. And this needs to be proven to a certificate authority. So this, it's a little bit, yeah, okay, a little bit, yeah, to be very clear, okay, to be very, very clear, so there's actually a registration authority where you verify your identity, and the registration authority then confirms and asks the certificate authority to create a confirmation, a signed certificate that really this identity has been linked. So what you need to provide is to show your public key, you need to show your identity, and then the registration authority asks you to sign some information, as we had in an example, that they give you a challenge, so a number used once, and you should sign it, and then they verify really that the matching public key that you claim to be the owner of, the corresponding private key has been used in the creation of the signature. So they give you, basically, they give you R, so you give them the signed, this is B and this is R. You give them the signed number used once, and then they take the public key that they should bind to your identity and verify that it is that is verifying your signature, that really you have used the corresponding private key. And then they accept, okay, you really have the corresponding private key. So what they write, they create a document in which they write, okay, Bob is associated to this public key, and they sign it with their private key of the, I mean, they sign the document with their, yeah, with their corresponding private key. We'll also have a look at how this is done, and what further information is inside, but this is where the binding takes place, that specific person had the corresponding public key. So, and now it's very easy, because that was a challenge that we had in the asymmetric cryptography, that we didn't have the verification who is really behind, who's the owner of a specific public key. And now if we want to communicate, so Alice wants to communicate with Bob, yeah, and previously we had the example that you need to ask for the public key, but now you don't have to. So you just need to know, okay, I want to talk to Bob, maybe it's bob.com, I don't know. And then you have some kind of registry somewhere where all the public keys are listed. So there's an entry for Bob, and there's a public key given, and you just simply take that public key and can use it. Yeah, you can just simply use it to communicate any kind of message that you want to use. So you don't have even to communicate up front to Bob, to ask him for his public key, for his certificate, or for his public key, because you can use the certificate provided by the registry. So you can get it from elsewhere, that's typically the registry, and then eventually it's working. And how does the certificate look like? So basically what we will find, also in the real example, so you will find there's a subject that will tell who the entity is. That's typically a domain, but could also be a single person. We will have in our example the certificate from my domain. There's some, of course, the public key must be given. Yeah, so this is KG plus. There should be a validity period so that it's not indefinitely valid, but let's say for 2 years. There's some issuer, that's very important. Who is giving out this certificate? So who is the identity, the company who verified that this domain is really linked to, this domain name is really linked to the public key, and there's some kind of signature. There, of course, these are the minimum elements, but of course there are also some other elements, such as what algorithm has been used for the signature and so on. Let's have a look. We can also have a clear look directly in the browser. Can I do this? Yes, let's have a look in the browser. Okay. So this is some website, some random. So and then we go to this lock symbol up here. It's a little bit small. Connection secure. More information. Black, white on black. That's not ideal. So we can have a look at the certificate. So this is the certificate for the domain, and the 5 core elements that should be inside. It's the subject name. This is the domain name. Then there's the issuer who has signed the verification that they checked really the public key associated to this domain. There's a validity, in which time frame it's valid. It's just valid for 3 months, and it's automatically renewed. Some further name under which it's available. This is the public key information, and here you have E, and this is N. So it's a very big number, N, and this is the very big number that is difficult to compute the 2 prime factors for. So this is an hexadecimal representation, and I'm not really sure, does it, this is the full number, okay. So as an exercise for at home, you can try to find the 2 common factors. Otherwise, A is often taken as quite deterministic number, so it's not really that there's some big selections. They try to use commonly the same number. So let's take some other website. Let me just see. So this one not. Professor Lang. And let's see whether he has a different A. So that's the previous professor here. Connection secure. More information. Viewed certificate. And he has the same E. So it's quite common. So what is else written there? Some serial number by which it was handed out by the company, which signature algorithm is used, and here you can download the signature. So we will not find in this website, in this overview, the signature data, but it can be downloaded and verified. There's some fingerprints. That's not so interesting. Subject key ID, authority key ID. But the core elements are really the subject, the issuer, validity, maybe the algorithm used, and the signature that we don't see. That's a little bit annoying. So the question then is, okay, why do we trust this company called Let's Encrypt? Common name, so the company's name is R10. And how do we know that really this company has signed it? So can we trust the signature of the company? Do we have the public key of the company? And then we have here the next, so it's basically the next tab. This is the company who signed it, and it has been signed by the Internet Security Research Group, Root X1. So basically they verified that the company R10 is properly doing the verification step, and they confirm that the processes internally in the company are valid. And then the question is, why do we trust this company? So can't Trudy just make up her own company and create such a chain of signatures? And the last one is basically, if you have a look, who is this company? Then we see the certificate for the company, the signature of the company. This is the company that is signed, is by the company itself. So why do we trust this company? And that it has the right, that is trustable enough that such a self-certificate, such a self-signature is trusted. Yeah, that's the last point. It's basically because in the system, if we go to let's say settings of certificates, about certificates, yes. So if we about certificate, one moment. So I just want to this one. So these are all the certificates that are stored in the browser. And that's just a list of certificates that are self-signed and that Firefox deems trustworthy. And the same applies also for Chrome and for Safari. So these are the root anchors, the so-called root anchors. So they are not further questioned. They are trusted as doing their steps and their process and their duties diligently. So, and in your browsers you have this kind of root anchors which are not questioned. In your operating system you have the same. And these are the common ones, and of course they should not be failing. So if any one of those fails in their process, then they lose all their business value, because the core element is that they do not fail, that they do not hand out wrong certificates. If they would do so, they would lose their whole business. So they have a high incentive to keep their processes intact. Okay. So far with the overview of on networking and basically security. So what we will have next is to look at various elements. So what we did up to now, so we looked into security basics, we looked into networking basics, and basically what we can now do is to combine all of these. And what you will see is these are building blocks. So we'll always have the same building blocks reoccurring in the future. It will be very common to have a following process. That's a really very common element. So there's first A and B who wants to communicate, independent of on which layer. And there's first some kind of handshake where they establish the authenticity of themselves. So typically here's some kind of certificate claiming for the contacted server who that server is, that there's some kind of confirmation, that there's some kind of verification that which public key belongs to this domain. That is also the verification that the corresponding server has the corresponding private key, so that it needs to sign something. Then typically during this process, what we will see in this handshake, they will establish some common crypto suite. So basically they will tell each other, okay, I'm capable to support this and that cryptographic elements and algorithms, and then they select the crypto algorithms to use. And they also exchange some kind of key basis. So, and for all of this, typically they use some kind of asymmetric encryption and asymmetric cryptography, both for the certificates to authenticate the participants, obviously also for integrity, that the messages are not changed on their way, so that there's some hashes involved, and there's confidentiality also, that others cannot read what key base is exchanged. And then typically once the key base is exchanged on both sides, they have so why did it crash? I don't know, but it's a good reminder to put some electricity in. PowerPoint is sometimes quite annoying. So Machen wir es mal hier. So, what will we face? Because in the next slides we will cover various prominent protocols. But the core elements that you will find is, as I said, that typically what we will have is first we will have some kind of asymmetric approach where we have some kind of handshake. That means there's a query, there's some response, there's some other response. Typically asking, typically in this step, B confirms, so it somehow provides its certificate, or it provides some kind of signature for something. So it somehow verifies its identity. So authentication is provided. There's also some kind of integrity provided through hashing and signatures, and also using the public keys that are associated to this, that are associated to the communication party. So we have also some confidentiality. And typically the first element is to first clarify which cryptographic algorithms are supported, and then there's one selected selection. So what you need to agree on is basically the symmetric encryption mechanism, then the hashing. So also there are various elements, and maybe you will also have some kind of key exchange mechanism, so whether Diffie-Hellman is to be used or not. Okay, so once this is done, typically then the outcome is that on both sides there will be some core key, and this core key is then used to create over the time various new keys. And this now I see one element we still miss. And typically, so these keys can be derived one after another over some period of time, and for this period of time they use first key 1 to use some symmetric encryption, and then they use key 2, and then they use key 3, so that they limit the time and the amount of messages they use the different symmetric keys for. And now I see one further element is missing: how to provide integrity in symmetric encryption. Do you know? Do you remember from I don't know, previous lectures? How do you provide data integrity, basically verifying that the data has not been changed since sending it from the sender to the destination, using only symmetric encryption? So with asymmetric it would be somehow easy. You create so asymmetric, so integrity. So what's the goal of integrity? Integrity means that if somebody modifies the data without permission, this will be detected. So an asymmetric approach is you take the message, you create the hash of it, you sign the hash of it, minus with your own. So let's say A is communicating to B. You sign it, and then you send it to B, and you send also the message to B. So then B gets M, and sorry, this is no. So you send, of course, the signed hash. Okay, so and yeah, that's right. So, and then B gets this data, and basically because the public key of A is known and there are signatures, sorry, not this one, you can take the public key of A, you can decrypt, basically confirm the signature, and you get it as an outcome. You get the hash that has been signed by the author. And then you take the message, you create your own. So let's say this has been modified. You create the same, the hash as well, and then you compare whether this is equal. So this is how you check for integrity with asymmetric approaches, and because one single bit modification results in totally different hash, you would detect that the two hashes are not equal. So how to do it in a symmetric way? In a symmetric approach, what we have is that both participants have a key k, let's say. And what they do is they send a message. So here confidentiality is not in focus, but they also send a hash that takes the message and adds the key. So you just add the bits of the key at the end. So and this is something that you can send. And obviously the recipient gets now here M, gets here this hash. And what they do is they take their local key, so they also have some key. So they add to this message also their key, and then they check is it equal. Why is that working? Because if this has been modified, and then it's also different than the hash that has been sent. And any kind of attacker who wants to introduce some kind of new message would be required to create so this is the information that the attacker doesn't have, the key. So it cannot create a valid hash using its modified data, because it cannot create some hash that the recipient will also create, because the recipient uses the key k and the attacker cannot use that key. So this is a so-called where to write it. So this is, let's say, this is the hash, not hashe, hash-based message, hash-based message, authentication code. I will add a slide for that. And this is the HMAC. So basically you take your key, you add it to the message, you create the hash, and only the recipient with the same key can recreate the same hash if the original message matches. And this key cannot be used by anyone else, only the sender and the recipient have it. So what did we see? So basically we learned how message integrity is done by asymmetric and symmetric approaches. We have seen that confidentiality by simply encrypting it, but the core question is, on the one side, how do we know to whom a public key belongs? This is done through certificates. And in the symmetric approach, how do we exchange the key? This is done by Diffie-Hellman or by asymmetric encryption. So we have basically learned any element how to provide confidentiality, authentication, and integrity, and this we will see repeatedly be used in the next protocols that we look into. Yeah. Okay. So then we jump into yes, the first element, and in the exercise we also had some kind of first glance into it. So basically what goals we have in networks, and what is maybe also different to other kind fields of IT security. So what we typically have is that we have two perspectives on the one on network security. On the one side is about architecture, let's say, how to build networks so that we can maintain our security goals that are all these authentication, confidentiality and integrity, but also availability. So typically we don't want that's right. Yeah. We don't want that potential attackers gain knowledge about our networks, gain access to our networks, can modify the data in our networks, can stop our networks from operating. So the question will be, how do we set up our architectures, our network architectures to provide this? What components do we need? What functionality these components have, so that we provide our security goals. Okay. This is one element. Another element what's often more in focus is that you really consider some kind of A-B communication, and how do you provide the security goals for this one-to-one communication or end-to-end communication. But on a larger scale, that means how do you structure your networks so that the security goals are provided. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look. I know it's a little bit just jumping into the cold water, but let's think, or let's consider a little bit for a while the potential requirements that we state for securing networks with the security goals in mind. So let's assume we have a company with 3 departments: accounting, so HR, production development and sales. There should be a web server, an email server. Some people are in home office and frequently work from home. Some are at the customer side and then need to access internal data. So how to describe it? Maybe this way: there are these different departments. There should be some kind of web server. There should be some kind of email server. There should be regular people. These are customers, maybe. Customers. It's a little bit bigger, the letters now. Okay, customers and the home office workers should not just access email, but should also access somehow the internal networking infrastructure. So how would we approach this kind of network requirements? So what kind of potential structure do you see? What kind of considerations should be addressed? What should we avoid? What kind of requirements should we set for the network? But I think I saw you in IT security previously. Or did you have already IT security previously? Okay, okay. Okay, it has been a while. Okay, good. Now good. So what we need is maybe identify. Okay, so first of all, let's draw the internals, so HR and production and sales. So let's say these are the internal elements, production and sales. They might be able to maybe communicate internally with each other. So if here's a printer, so the typical use case is always, here's a printer, here's a file server. So if there's, and I don't know, personal records. So if there are these various services integrated, then the salesperson should also be able to print, and the HR person should be able to access the file server data, so that internally all communication should be permitted, let's say. Then there are the home office people. what they want is they should be able to act as if they would be on site. So there should be no difference whether they are here or whether they are there. But here's somehow the internet barrier. So they are somewhere remote. Okay, what should not happen is if there's some attacker, so let's draw him in some other color. So obviously the home office person should be able to access, but the attacker should not be able to access the internal parts such as the file server, personal records, or the printer. So there should be some kind of authentication based access control. And not just at the file server. I mean, the file server should not be open to the internet and everybody can try to log in, but the attacker should not be able to send any packets to the file server at all, because that would cause too much stress and potentially attack the availability of the system. So if there are hundreds and thousands of requests per second on the file server, probably file server crashes, goes down, and the availability is not given. What else did we have in the example? Okay, web server. Okay, so these internal elements should not be accessible, but there should be some kind of web server and email server. Let's draw it also here, email. So now the attacker should be able to access the website. Yeah, attacker and maybe also regular customer. So the customer, who could also be an attacker, I mean, it's where to differentiate. They should be able to access the web server. Home office should also be able to access the email, and also an attacker or customer should be able to send an email to the email server. So what is the difference between a customer visiting a web server, a website, and an attacker? Yeah.
The customer just does what he or she is supposed to do, like using the elements as intended, and the attacker tries to manipulate the elements so he can access.
Yeah. So let's say regular behavior. So what's regular behavior? And because unregular could also be regular behavior, but 1,000 times in a second or so. So it's one about I don't know, too much traffic, too much queries, too much whatever. But it could be also malformed and attack, so malformed requests or addressing weaknesses, vulnerabilities. Very, very broad letter. So it's a little bit difficult to differentiate. So when is too much? When is a malformed request potentially dangerous? So you see, the network in which these services operate, that should be somehow protected from outside. That could be for example also some kind of architecture setup that you say this kind of network that we have here should not be accessible from any non-employee. Yeah, only employees should be able to send messages here. Here, this is somehow shared, so it's both accessible by public but also by employees. And there's the internet, the outside world. So you want basically to create some kind of filters. Okay, what do we need? Let's identify what we need. We need some kind of filters or some access control that allows us to specify who's allowed to send messages into our network. So the internal network with the file server, printer, and personal records, and the devices of the employees internally should not be accessible from the outside world, except they are home office users. Then the email and web servers should be accessible also from outside, but there should be some kind of anomaly detection, let's say. Anomaly detection, or let's say attack detection. Very broad. So so there's some different kind of approach, because the filter would work in a way that not a single packet coming from outside, from a not allowed region, should be permitted, but the anomaly detection, attack detection would allow individual packets, but if it's too much somehow or irregular, then it should act. So it's a different kind of functionality. So, and what else do we need? And these are the elements that we cover. So basically we need some kind of this home office person. This is some strange element in the network, because it should act as if it would be internal. So what we want to do is that somehow this home office person should act as it would be internal in the network, although it's outside. So there should be some kind of remote connection connecting it to the internal network, providing all the secure elements of confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity, so to really verify that the person that we are letting in is the person that we think it is. Both ways, so also the internal network should authenticate itself. So, and then it's somehow virtually part of the original network, and then it would be very clean. So let's assume we just have this internal network, internal participant, then it's very clear borders where the filters could be applied, let's say. And so let's say to have a strong filter here, to not allow anything going inside, and some weaker filter, anomaly detection, attack detection for the services that are also accessible to the outside world. Maybe one question: should really no message from outside be able to enter the internal network? Or should we make some exceptions? So let's say HR department. What kind of data should still be allowed to reach HR department from outside of the network? Or should we have a filter? No data should be allowed to be sent to the HR department.
I mean, the home office people should probably be able to contact HR, but
let's say we create some kind of system that home office people somehow have their virtual position internal in the network. And then it would act like they would communicate internally. Yeah. But taking that aside, so should there be also some kind of contact person outside that should be able to send a message to HR? Google, for example. Should Google be able to send messages to the HR department?
No.
Okay, then the HR department wants to look up something. How do I manage people? And you send out the query, and then the reply comes back and is then dropped. So yes, I mean, responses should be able to come back. So somehow this filter should keep in mind a special case reply. But otherwise, no, let's say no new messages, no new communication openings should be initiated from outside to the internal network. Okay, so these are the core elements that we need. It's a little bit colorful. Basically, we have the challenge: how do we integrate external elements in our core internal network? Second, how do we filter how do you filter external messages that we don't want, so that we can create an internal network, a shared network. So how is the filtering done? And then the third element, how do we have some kind of anomaly detection, where the parts that are exposed to the internet, and we know the internet is always there, attacks going on, that's the core assumption. How do we make sure that we can detect misbehavior on the network, on the traffic that we observe, and stop it? So these are the three core elements. Okay, so let's have a look. So key security objectives: protect the internal network from unauthorized access from the internet. So this was the filter. Detection and notification of attack attempts. That's the detection element. That was number 3. Separation of sensitive systems from publicly accessible systems. That's again the filter. Okay, or somehow, I don't know, network structure. Separation of departments from each other. Network structure, yeah, maybe this is, I don't know, 0. Network structure. That somehow struck. So that we are somehow able to create this kind of structures that, I mean, that the HR people are connected to the HR department, that production is connected to, so that you have this kind of hierarchical aggregation, so that you can still decide whether there should be some links possible. But let's say that if somebody in the HR department is not connecting his device to the Department of Production Development, I don't know, so that you can still. So what's the benefit of creating such kind of hierarchical organization or hierarchical summaries of individual participants? So here, for example, in the university, why does it make sense to have, let's say, a network for Fachbereich 2, for the pool PCs, for a Wi-Fi for the students, a Wi-Fi for employees? Why does it make sense? Or in this case, why does it make sense? So if Bob is working in HR and Alice is working here in production development, why does it make sense that Alice connects her notebook here and not has a long cable there? Yeah?
Different rights, different. So maybe Bob does need some other functionality than Alice does in her job.
Exactly.
The professors here have,
yeah, so that's very, very right. So typically, let's take the students example, and I don't know, employees. Typically, and then you have here thousands of people, and here you have hundreds of people. What you don't want to do is to have the rights assigned individually to the people. So what you want to do, just assume, because let's say there's a Wi-Fi for students and there's a Wi-Fi for employees. It's very simple. And now you want to, and the Wi-Fi S and E, so the Wi-Fi should accept any student, let's say. But the participation of students fluctuates every semester, so there's some coming, some going. So you don't want to update your hardware infrastructure every time. Please consider now Bob, and please consider now Charlie and Dave. But it should be sufficient that they are in the group of students. Yeah, and then you have the hardware and the infrastructure is just associated to the user group students and the other Wi-Fi for the employees. And how the association from students to a single person is, that you can do somewhere else. Basically, that's one simple association. You add a person to the students group, and with that it gains various rights, because the group students had various rights. So you don't have to inform every network element, there's a new person XY and now please consider him individually, but you just consider the user groups. And the same also with HR and production department and so on. If the people are associated to these organizational elements, you can determine the rights, what they can do based on the association and the group belongings, and you don't have to do it individually per person. That's why the separation of departments is reasonable. Yes, and everything should be ideally, here it's written unencrypted, not unencrypted, so it should be secure. And by secure, I will talk a lot about secure communication. Secure in this sense always means first you authenticate who's participating in the communication, and then you encrypt the communication for the other party, and it's also integrity is provided, so integer. That means that you have a signature, or you have this hash-based message authentication code, so that you have the 3 elements. That's then secure. So we will basically look into these elements. It's also written here very tiny, weighing secure benefit costs. Did you also learn with Professor Marx how the risk is defined? So because I mean there's always some risk of something happening, and you could also protect against various kind of security possibilities. So when do you stop?
We did learn this, but I could not tell you in detail.
Okay, no problem. So risk is very simply defined. Risk is defined as probability of happening. So Eintrittswahrscheinlichkeit times the potential costs that it generates. So if you lose your notebook, you have, let's say, 1,000 euros worth of as a cost, I don't know. Maybe your data is backed, maybe your device is protected so that people will not cause you further damage by having your notebook. So and the risk of losing your notebook might be 1,000 euros. Yeah, but how large is the probability of losing it? It's maybe 0.1%. So the risk that you are facing is €1. And if your protection costs are higher than €1 per day, let's say, if this is the probability to lose it per day, then you should not invest more than €1 per day to protect it. That's the base message. So, and the same also applies in various security elements. You could secure by layers and layers and very drastic elements. You can employ various security experts, but that increases your cost of securing. And if the potential risk, the potential loss with a given probability of happening is smaller than that, then it doesn't make sense. So basically, if you don't do anything, so these are the costs, and this is the effort you make. If you don't do anything, you have high costs, and if you do something, then it's fine, but if you do more, then it's expensive again. So you somehow have to find a sweet spot where you have to pay less, either for the security experts or for the potential loss that you gain, that you face. So this means secure benefit costs. So you just have to identify where's the trade-off, what's the sweet spot where you doesn't make sense to pay more. Yep.
But it's not the calculation of, I don't know how to put it, making lives easier. So the most secure network is the one that is not able to do anything.
Exactly. That's that's the typical element. If you have, that's also faced often that sometimes security departments are in favor to stop any kind of functionality because no attacker can access it then. And they don't have in focus that then also nobody's able to use it. Somehow it happens. I don't know. But that's unfortunate. Yeah.
But that's not the same calculation. So it's just.
No, it's more from the attacker side. Typically one should, so for proper security consideration, there should be some assessment. What are the potential attacks? How probable are they? What are the worst case? What is the potential cost associated to it? So, for example, if there's some kind of hack and people get some virus that spreads and encrypts all the hard disks of the employees, that has some very high risk. It might be low in the probability but high in the effect, and they should do more in order to address this, in contrast to, I don't know, losing notebooks or so. So that in relation is much of lower priority, of lower risk, meaning probability of happening and the cost associated to it. So if people cannot work for days or weeks, that's accumulating in large numbers. But if you lose a notebook for 1,000 euros, then so it's therefore it's really a balance, because as you said, if you would secure anything to any kind of degree, then people are also less productive and you have losses over that direction. So therefore in companies, they are looking to not limit their employees too much, so that they can still work somehow. At universities, it's not a big focus somehow, to not limit them. I don't know. Okay, so in our example, we identified these 3 elements. So first, how to incorporate the external home office user, the filter, and the anomaly detection. What we did not look at, and we might discuss at the side, but not in focus, attackers within the organization. Okay, let's write it down. So let's have this virtual participant. So how to incorporate externals. Participant. To have the filter and to have the detection. So, and then if you have internal attackers, typically the detection can also be applied there. Virus scanners, that also typically falls into the domain of detection. Protection of data in case of hardware theft. Yeah, that's interesting. So this is rather a not networking related topic. So this is typically that you go more for confidentiality and so on. That you have some kind of hardware encryption, but it's not. So network security often focuses really on the communication between 2 parties where you don't know who your communication partner is, and there are potentially millions of attackers. Yeah. In parallel active. Yeah, and if you lose your hardware, user-friendliness training of users, this is often, this is a very dedicated separate field. I will also talk about this, because this is sometimes underestimated how relevant this is, but that's also relevant. Regular updates, current security information, interesting point. We will also talk about this, because one of the core elements is always recommended to update your services to be on track and up to date, because the developers of common software products are very much interested in keeping any vulnerabilities out of their system. So if they detect something, there's a problem, they fix it, they have a patch, they have an update. So the more up to date you are with your software, the better, the more vulnerabilities are considered and have been blocked. So there are many elements that we will touch, but we will focus on these 3 elements for networking. Okay, so let's start with the first steps. In case I find my mouse, Okay, so that's what we should build for the architecture. You have 8 minutes. We went a little bit through it. Do you want to take your time how to ideally build it, or should we go through it? Are you No, okay. Okay, so let's have a look. So what do we need? We let's also identify where to put in some filters. So how can we apply basically some organizational borders where we say that communication should not pass this border. So this kind of filter. So as we said, there's first the internal departments. They should be able to communicate with each other and send some queries out, and only the replies should be able to come back. Okay. But from outside, any kind of message addressing them not as a reply should be blocked. Then we have some servers here, web server and email. Web and email. They should be accessed from outside, that's fine. And then there's the evil internet. And somehow we need to create some kind of situation where this external home office user is able to be acting as part of this internal network. So this would be my sample setup for the architecture. Let's have a look. And let's call this borders firewalls. And so we will also go deeper into the firewalls, but what they do is basically to filter traffic. So they have a look at the messages, and then based on the information they see in the messages, they decide whether they let it pass or not. And typically they look into the header, and only in the header. So meaning they look into IP addresses, so source and destination. They look into ports, source, destination. What do they else look into? TCP, UDP. What else can they look into? So I think this is the core elements that they look into. Yeah. So that's not even too much. So and here are the three departments, and for example what you can say in this filter is if the IP address is from the domain, let's say these are some IP ranges. So if A wants to communicate with B, A to B should be allowed as domain IP ranges, and B to C should be also allowed so they can communicate with each other. Then this is the first filter. So for example, if this is IP range I, then I to A should not be allowed. So the internet should not be able to send messages to A. We will see how we deal with the replies. And also not to C and also not to B. So then we have the next border, let's say here, where we have this so-called demilitarized zone, where we have the servers, where it is allowed. So if this is D, I should be able to communicate with D, yeah, but I should not be able to communicate to A and B and C. So this is some filter that we could set up in this two separate filters. Okay, and what do we have here as well? Some intrusion detection system. So here we have some detection element ongoing. Of course, we could also have the detection also here and detection there and detection there. So we could put it everywhere because it doesn't harm. It's just an additional cost factor. And the element would be, the point would be that here we observe all traffic that's ongoing in the internet. Here we observe all traffic that passed our firewall 1. Yeah, actually we could also have some intrusion detection here. So after each border that we can see what was left through and maybe detect some kind of irregularities. But one must also say, so if there's some traffic X and it wants to reach C, then it has to pass this detection system, and potentially this detection system. So it passes anyway several detection systems. So, and I always like to think in interfaces. So what is the interface that we have for so we have here two elements. So this is the filter, that was number 2 in our example. Here we have the detection system, and here we have the so-called virtual private network. This is this, how can we incorporate the external home office user and make him act through some kind of virtual private network as if he or she would be part of this local network. So this we will also have a look how this is incorporated. So these will be our core elements that we look at. Did you had this point with Professor Marx? How far did you go? Because I'm not too familiar with. No. Okay. No. Yes. No. Partially. No problem. Okay. So what's the nice thing? Okay. Let's have a look at this in terms of interfaces that I always like. So how does it look like? So what's the in and out of this black box? So if you have a firewall, what is the input? This is the traffic. Every packet comes along, and basically what the firewall does, it looks at IP source, destination, it looks at port, source, destination, and it looks at whether it's TCP or UDP. So, and then it has two potential outcomes. Yeah, it's just two, very simple. So either it's a drop, so it deletes the message, or it lets it pass. This is a very typical filter. Okay, the intrusion detection system, or maybe it's network intrusion detection system, doesn't matter. So it also gets the traffic. Yeah, getting the traffic means every single packet is individually looked at. And what it does, it's a little bit more complex because it looks at the whole package. It will look into the header, but it will also dedicatedly look into the body. What can you do? So it is like an antivirus program for network packets. And it has some information on how malicious data packets look like, very similar to the signature files in antivirus programs. They also have some kind of files in which it's written, if you see this byte pattern or bit pattern, this is clearly a sign, this is virus XY. And the same also is in the case of intrusion detection systems. It has a list. We will also have a look at the list where it's written, if this byte pattern arrives, this is considered malicious, this is attack XYZ. What can you do? It can either, okay, the simplest one is always pass. So if it's not an attack, then just let it pass. If it's an attack, then it's drop plus alert. So somebody should be informed about it. And if you don't know, then alert and either store or pass. So I mean, you can, the simplest one is that you let it pass, and if something strange is happening, either you know for sure that it's bad, then you drop it and give an alert to the admin. And if you are not sure, then you ask the admin, give a message, and maybe store it to be delivered later, or you let it pass, or you drop it. So it really depends on how clear you are, how the packet is to be considered. But the main difference between the filter and the intrusion detection system is that we also look into the body. So, and VPN, what's the difference there? What's the interface there? So it's basically, okay. So what it does, it offers you a socket, meaning any kind of data that you put in is not, it's somehow magically transferred to some socket at the VPN server and released there. So it's like a tunnel which goes through malicious area. So through internet, and it is authenticated, so you know whom you are communicating to, so the VPN server. It's confidential, it's everything encrypted, so nobody on the internet can read your data, and it's integer, so nobody can modify it without detection. So it offers you basically a secure socket, meaning you tell, okay, please connect to this IP address, this port, and give me some kind of network socket for my program that I can put data into and packets into, and every packet that you put into will pop out at the VPN server. Okay, so these are the interfaces. So let's have a look step by step. Starting with the firewall. So the firewall, again, is a filter. It separates two areas of the network from each other, and it has mostly two options to achieve. Yeah, some things are allowed through, others not. So you will define what is allowed to pass through. So this is so it's a filter. I mean, and you have to define what should be allowed or not. And this can be applied at different kind of protocol layers. So one, you were also facing in the exercise. Did you already start with exercise number 1? Maybe the labor exercise 1?
But it was due to last Friday, wasn't it? So we already did exercise 1.
Ah, yeah. Wasn't it the proxy?
Yes.
With the script proxy? Yeah. Yeah, that's why we are a little bit early with the exercise. So basically, one option to do it is on the proxy, is also an application layer, also called proxy. One, I mean, you can have it on an application layer, one on a transport layer, one on a network layer. So it really depends on what information it considers for filtering. So what I said is IP and the source and destination. This is mostly on this network layer. In the proxies, you can also have further information, such as if it's in web proxy, web server proxies, an HTTP proxy. It looks into the commands that you send, so whether it's a GET, whether you say what kind of browser you have, and based on that, it makes some kind of modification. Let's have a look at proxies. Yeah, this is what we had in the exercise before. So, and typically, what it does is it connects between the client and the server, and so the client is not directly communicating with the server. So typically, this path is somehow blocked, also with a firewall. So it has to communicate over a proxy, and the proxy is then able to look into the messages and decide whether to let the message pass or not, and maybe to modify it. It's a little bit different than in regular firewalls and network layer firewalls. So here in the application layer firewall, the proxy can also take influence on your request. So typically, where do you see this? This is when, let's say you are in a company, and you have all of your web queries should pass a proxy, and you have very big competitors, and the proxy would like to see, do you check their website? Do you want to send some files to them? Are you using Dropbox to upload some files from the secure intranet or so? So what it can do is to cut off all other options, and you have to communicate with web servers over the proxy, and the proxy can then verify whether you are sending large data amounts out containing the string, I don't know, secrets.xls or so. Yeah. So you have to go to the proxy. You have to tell which server you want to connect to. this is all typically all configured in the browser, and the proxy checks whether you are allowed to do it or not. So it can apply some kind of application layer filtering. Let's say also, if you have an email, a server, and a proxy associated to it, it can verify that you don't send attachments that have hash values which belong to sensitive data or so, or that you are not sending specific file types or so. So this is all something that you can enforce by a proxy, basically to filter on the application layer how the people use it. Yes. No. What it can also do, so again, on the one side, it can, for example, for HTTP, block all posts, commands where you upload data. But it can also, and the specific element is that all these proxies are very related to the specific application layer protocol they are built for. So a web proxy or HTTP proxy is for HTTP traffic. So it knows the internals of the protocol and really can take influence on it. So for example, allow from server X to download any HTML files but not JPEG images or otherwise. I mean, typically it's how to control what companies, that you do not send out company data, or it logs what kind of websites you visit and what interactions you do. So that if in a company there's a proxy ongoing, then you can somehow quite be sure that there's some kind of surveilling how the web access is used. So you can access external servers only for certain user after a prior login. I mean, you can also apply some access control. You can apply which websites to visit, no YouTube, cat videos, and so on. And one example we looked into, so for example, one typical application can also be in your favor, Privoxy, for privacy, that filters sensitive information and sends out clean messages. So for example, I think, I'm not really sure, did you had in your exercise also the element of looking into what kind of data is sent by a website? So if you state a request to a website, so if you want to make it more private, so let's visit so what was sent, it was not just sent, please give me the website. So here the object slash, can it be read? Yes, here the object slash from this host, but it also told what kind of browser I have, what operating system I have, what documents I accept, what language I accept, and so on. And if you would apply a proxy, you could, for example, change this information, you could change that information. You can also drop all additional information and just take what they give without exposing more information about you. Because this kind of information could also be used to trace you over some period of time. So yes, it might be something that also other users share, but let's say if you have a website that only is rarely visited and somebody has here Firefox 173, maybe this kind of combination is so unique that you can still identify the requesting client over a period of time. So there's one goal is privacy, where you can just the proxy basically in the middle takes the message that we just saw, drops all unnecessary header information, and then forwards it on, and then the reply comes back to the proxy, and the proxy passes it on to the original requesting client. We also had tested Squid, that on one side acts also as a cache, so it can give you quicker results. but it can also, I think, be used to modify information that is sent out. So, for example, if previously we have seen that I was using Mozilla Firefox, you could use Squid to type in there some other information that you would like, and this is then also sent out. Later we will see that by modifying this kind of header information, we could also embed some kind of some hidden information that could be used as some kind of secret message, but currently not. Just to wrap up for this kind of various firewalls. So we also, okay, this was application layer firewalls, which understands HTTP very well, or IMAP or SMTP, and it can filter based on that. But we can also have it on the transport layer for TCP or UDP, often for TCP only, where it allows to connect. It's the same pattern. So you have a proxy, and you want to communicate to B. And the proxy is the man in the middle. So first it authenticates itself if requested to. You tell whom you want to communicate to. The proxy establishes the connection to B. It confirms it to the client and acts. I mean, it's just the man in the middle, but which is enforced typically by the company that is using that proxy, or you set it up yourself. Because obviously you could also create a direct connection to B. And in order to not that happening, first you need to modify, your application program must support that you use this kind of proxy, this socket proxy. So either you configure it yourself, or the company that you are in, and they forbid direct communications to that server. What is here the use case? So let's say, again, you want to take influence on what kind of queries are sent, how it is used, and this proxy can enforce these rules and act as a filter also for TCP messages. So you can limit how many TCP messages or connections you establish to a server. For example, that you are not allowed to have more than 5 connections to the server, otherwise the next one will be blocked. Okay, next time we will look into the regular packet filter firewalls and how they work, and how we configure them using also IP tables, so that we specify who's allowed to pass our filter and who's not. Okay, thanks for your time. Have a nice day, and see you then later sometime in the exercise.